Hello and welcome back to Key Philosophies. Today we'll be carrying on with key philosophies and an essay on economics. Cantillon's essay on economics. Chapter 12. This should be great. Should prove to be nicely controversial. We like that. All classes and individuals in a state subsist or grow rich at the expense of the property owners. Abstract. Cantillon develops a circular flow model of the economy that shows the distribution of farm production between property owners, farmers, and workers. Farm production is exchanged for goods and services produced in the cities by entrepreneurs and artisans, while the property owners are independent. The model demonstrates the mutual interdependence between all the classes of people that Adam Smith dubbed the invisible hand in the theory of moral sentiments in 1759. All classes and individuals in a state subsist or grow rich at the expense of the property owners. There are none but the prince and the property owners who live independent. All other classes and inhabitants are hired or are entrepreneurs. The proof and detail of this will be developed in the next chapter. If the prince and the property owners close their estates and will not allow them to be cultivated, it is clear that there would neither be food nor clothing for any of the inhabitants of the state. Consequently, all the individuals of the state are supported not only by the product of the land that is cultivated for the benefit of the owners, but also at the expense of these same owners, from whose property they derive all that they have. The farmers generally have 2/3 of the product of the land, one of their expenses and the maintenance of their assistants, the other for their profit of their enterprise. On these 2/3, the former generally provides, directly or indirectly, subsistence for all those who live in the country, and also for artisans or entrepreneurs in the city because of the goods from the city that are consumed in the countryside. The owner usually has 1/3 of the product of his land, and on this third he maintains all the artisans and others, whom he employs on the city as well. This often includes those who bring the goods from other countrysides to the city. It is generally assumed that 1/2 of the inhabitants of the state subsist and reside in cities, and the other half live in the country. That being the case, the farmer, who has 2/3 or 4/6 of the product of the land, pays directly or indirectly 1/6 to the city residents in exchange for the goods he acquires from them. This sixth, with the 1/3 or 2/6 that the owner spends in the city, make 3/6 or 1/2 of the product of the land. This calculation is only to convey a general idea of the proportion, but in fact, if half of the inhabitants live in the cities, they consume more than half of the products of the land's products. That is, if they live in the city. They live better than those who reside in the countryside and consume more of the production of the land, because all artisans and dependents of the property owners are better maintained than the assistants and dependents of the farmers. That sound familiar? It's just like every day, isn't it? In any event, if we examine the means by which an inhabitant is supported, one will always find, when going back to the source, that their income comes from the owner's land, either in 2/3 of the production of the product reserved by the farmer, or the 1/3 that remains with the owner. If a property owner only had enough land for one farmer, the farmer would get a better living out of it than the owner would. However, the nobles and large property owners in the cities sometimes have several hundred farmers, and thus there are very few owners in proportion to all the inhabitants of the state. It is true that there are often several entrepreneurs and artisans in the large cities who live by foreign trade, and therefore at the expense of foreign landowners. But at present I am only considering a state with regard to its production and with its own industry, in order to avoid cluttering my argument with accidental circumstances. The land belongs to the owners, but would be useless to them if it were not cultivated. The more labor is expended on it, and other things being equal, the more it produces, and the more its products are refined, other things being equal, the more value they have as goods. So you see it highlights on 29 that here Cantillon employs a closed economy assumption or a condition for his model. The more it produces, the more its products are refined. Other things being equal, the more value they have as goods. Therefore, the owners need the inhabitants as they need the owners. However, in this economy, it is the property owners who have the control and direction of the landed capital to give the most advantageous turn and movement to the whole. Also, everything in a state depends mainly on the modes, and ways of life of the property owners, as I will try to clearly show in the remainder of the essay. Thus, needs and necessity enables farmers, artisans of every kind, merchants, officers, soldiers, sailors, domestic servants, and all other classes who work or are employed in a state to exist. All these working people serve not only the prince and the property owners, but each other as well. Many of them do not work directly for the property owners, and so it is not seen that they subsist on the capital of the property owners and live at their expense. As for those whose professions are not essential, like dancers, actors, painters, musicians, etc., they are only supported in the state for pleasure or ornamentation, and their number is always very small compared to the population. The mutual dependence between the wealthy property owners and the labor is what Adam Smith refers to as the invisible hand in the theory of moral sentiments. That was chapter 12. Chapter 13. The circulation and exchange of goods and merchandise, as well as their production, are carried on in Europe by entrepreneurs and at a risk. In the abstract, here Cantillon introduces for the first time the theory of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are the prime directors of resources. Their occupations come with risk due to uncertainty, especially from competition and changing tastes. As a result, their income can be very large, but they also face the prospect of bankruptcy. The property owner is independent in having a large income, rent from the land, and the capitalist or large money owners also can live independently on interest. Everyone else is ultimately dependent on the entrepreneurship, or everyone else is ultimately dependent on the expenditures of property owners for their livelihoods. The farmer is an entrepreneur who promises to pay the property owner for his farm or land a fixed sum of money, generally assumed to be equal in value to a third of the production, without assurance of profit he will derive from his enterprise. He employs part of the land to feed the herd, produce grain, wine, hay, etc., according to his judgment, without being able to foresee which of these will pay the best price, and the price of these products will depend partly on the weather, partly on demand. If wheat is abundant compared to consumption, it will sell at a cheap price. If there is scarcity, it will be expensive. Who can predict the number of births or deaths that will occur during that current year? He's presuming probably no one. Who can foresee that increase or reduction in expenditures that can occur in families? And yet, the price of the farmer's product naturally depends upon these unforeseen circumstances, and consequently, he conducts the enterprise of his farm with uncertainty. The city consumes more than half of the farmer's products. He carries it to the market or sells it in the market of the nearest town, or perhaps to entrepreneurs who provide the transport. They oblige themselves to pay the farmer a fixed price for his product, the market price of the day, to receive an uncertain price in the city, which they should nonetheless defray the cost of transportation and leave them a profit. However, the daily variation in the price of products in the city, though not considerable, makes their profit uncertain. The entrepreneur or merchant who transports the products of the countryside cannot stay there to sell them at retail until the products are consumed. No family in a city will burden itself with the purchase at one time of the products it may need over time, because each family is susceptible to increase or decrease in size and consumption, or at least to variation in the choice of products it will consume. Wine is almost the only article of consumption stocked by families. In any case, the majority of citizens live day to day, and even the large consumers will not be able to stock away products from the countryside. For this reason, many people set up as merchants or entrepreneurs in the city to buy the country products from those who bring it, or to have it brought back to their account or on their account. They pay a fixed price for them at the place where they are purchased, to resell wholesale or retail at an uncertain price. Such entrepreneurs are the wholesalers of wool and grain, and the bakers, butchers, manufacturers, and merchants of all kinds, who buy country products and materials to work them up and resell them gradually as the inhabitants require them for consumption. The entrepreneurs never know how great the demand will be in their city, nor how long their customers will buy from them, since their rivals will try by all sorts of means to attract their customers. All this causes so much uncertainty among the entrepreneurs that every day, one sees some of them go bankrupt. The manufacturer who has brought wool from the merchant or directly from the farmer cannot know the profit he will make in selling his clothes and fabrics to the tailor. If the latter does not have reasonable sales, he will not burden himself with the clothes and fabrics of the manufacturer, especially if those fabrics have gone out of fashion. The draper or clothier is an entrepreneur who buys clothes and fabrics from the manufacturer at a certain price in order to sell them again at an uncertain price, because he cannot foresee the extent of the demand. He can, of course, fix a price and abstain from selling unless he gets it. However, if his customer leaves him to buy cheaper from another, he will be consumed by expenses while waiting to sell at the price he demands, and that will ruin him soon or sooner if he sold without profit. Shopkeepers and retailers of every kind are entrepreneurs who buy at a certain price and sell at their shops or markets at an uncertain price. What encourages and maintains these entrepreneurs in a state is the fact that the consumers, who are their customers, prefer paying a little more to what they want promptly and in smaller quantities, rather than having to stock up. In general, most of them do not have the means to stock up by buying from wholesalers. All of these entrepreneurs become consumers and customers of each other. the draper of the wine merchant, and vice versa. In a state, they proportion themselves to the customers or their consumption. If there are too many hat makers in a city, or on a street for a number of people to buy hats, the least patronized must go bankrupt, and on the other hand, if there are too few, it will be a profitless business. Which will encourage new hat makers to open up shop. In this manner, entrepreneurs of all kinds adjust themselves to risks in a state. All the other entrepreneurs, like those who take charge of mines, the hatters, the buildings, the traders, builders of buildings, the traders by the sea and land, restaurateurs, pastry cooks and keepers, etc., as well as the entrepreneurs of their own labor who need no capital to establish themselves, like journeymen, artisans, coppersmiths, seamstress, chimney sweeps, water transporters, live with uncertainty and proportion themselves to their customers. Master craftsmen, like shoemakers, tailors, carpenters, wig makers, etc., who employ journeymen according to their work that they have, live with the same uncertainty since their customers may leave them any day. The entrepreneurs of their own labor in art and science, like painters, physicians, lawyers, etc., live in the same uncertainty. If one attorney or a lawyer earns 5,000 livres sterling per year in the service of his clients or in his practice, and another earns only 500, their income is as uncertain as those that employ them. It may perhaps be urgent that entrepreneurs seek to snatch all they can in their calling and to get the better of their customers, but this is outside my subject. By all these inductions and in infinity of others that could be made to extent this matter to the entire population of the state, it may be established that except for the prince and the property owners, all the inhabitants of the state are dependent. They can be divided into two classes: entrepreneurs and hired workers. The entrepreneurs are on unfixed wages, while the others are on fixed wages as long as there is work, although their functions and ranks may be very unequal. The general, who has his pay, the courtier his pension, and his domestic servant, who has his wages, all fall into this last class. All the others are entrepreneurs, whether they are set up with capital to conduct their enterprise or are entrepreneurs of their own labor without capital. And the robbers are entrepreneurs of this class. Finally, all the inhabitants of a state derive their living and their advantages from the property of the landowners and are dependent. It is true, however, that if a person on high wages or some large entrepreneur has saved capital or wealth, that is, if he has reserves of wheat, wool, copper, gold, silver, or some commodity or merchandise in constant use or circulation in a state having an intrinsic or real value, he may be justly considered independent as long as the capital lasts. He may exchange it to acquire a mortgage and receive income from the land and public loans secured upon the land. He may even live better than the small landowners and buy property from some of them. But commodities and merchandise, even gold and silver, are much more subject to accident and loss than ownership of land, and however one may have earned or saved them, they are always derived from land of actual owners, either by wages or by saving of wages destined for one's subsistence. The number of money owners in a large state is often quite considerable, though the value of all the money that circulates in a state barely exceeds the ninth or tenth part of the value of the production drawn from the soil, because the proprietors of the money lend considerable amounts for which they receive interest either by a mortgage on land or the commodities and merchandises of the land. The sums due to them usually exceed all the money in the state. They often become so powerful a body that they could, in certain cases, rival the property owners, if the property owners were not often also money owners, and if the owners of large sums of money did not also seek to become property owners themselves. Nonetheless, it is always true that all the sums earned or saved have been drawn from the land of the current owners. However, because so many property owners in a state ruin themselves daily, and those who acquire the property take their place, the independence given by the ownership of land applies only to those who keep possession of it. As all land always has a master or current owner, it is from their property that all the inhabitants of the land derive their living and all their wealth. If these owners confined themselves to living within their rental income, this would be beyond question, and in that case, it would be much more difficult for the other inhabitants to grow rich at their expense. I will therefore establish as a principle that the property owners alone are naturally independent in a state. All the other classes are dependent, whether entrepreneurs or hired, and that all the exchange in circulation of the state is conducted by the actions of these entrepreneurs. That was chapter 13. Next time we'll be on to chapter 14. Thank you for listening to Key Philosophies. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good day.